Hello, and welcome to another fully live news episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today I am going to take a couple of your ethical hacking questions while also going over the news of the week and talking about some cool tools and other things I've been working on. So if you are joining us, James, ACAT, and everyone else, it's good to see you. As most of you have figured out by maybe just a couple of these streams starting late and seeing no Killian, when it starts a little later, we're usually mourning, not the loss of Killian, but the loss of our co-host on the show, at least for one more episode. So today I'm going to be doing it all solo. Killian is hopefully de-stressing, relaxing a little bit, as all of us should. So yeah, I have a couple of things to show off today before we jump directly into the news. One of them is more 3D printing magic. So we've been talking about all the cool properties that are now possible with some of these 3D printers that can automatically switch between filaments. Bamboo Labs being one of the most obvious examples, but there are others out there like the Prusa XL. So I have been kind of testing the limits of what's possible with me, combining these materials in interesting ways and creating some interesting things. So the first one I wanted to show off was just kind of pure art. This is for communicating with other drivers. And the idea here is that I'm using a variety of materials to create this kind of overall appearance. I had to do a lot of minimizing of like colors and stuff like that. And then on the backside, it's just all kind of sand. So in order to make this work, I had to learn a bit about Inkscape, Illustrator, and a bunch of other programs that allowed me to make all the colors vectors and then also make sure that it was very simple and that I wasn't using too many colors. When it comes to these sorts of 3D printing things, they usually can handle about 4 different colors. So in this case, that's what my palette was restricted to. That makes it challenging, obviously. And you can do something like a lithopane, of which I have several around. And the lithopane, uses depth and shine through to create different colors to where you maybe only need 4 to create a bunch of different colors. But while these are really cool, I kind of got over them almost immediately. I did like one of them and I'm like, okay, this is cool, but it has one very specific application. Now mixing materials like glowing materials, now that is completely different. This is a little glow dog that was illustrated by a friend of mine. And this little guy will glow in the dark when lit up. And it is incredibly cute and cool that it also can be shined through. These are the kinds of projects that I'm becoming a bit more interested in, because by adding like a black backing to a diffuser or doing other things that allow light to shine through in interesting ways, I really think that there's some interesting applications here. And one of them is providing lit signage. So this is an example of a tunnel sign that I made for, let's say a storm drain system that I think is interesting. And this is a glow in the dark sign that will tell you at which point you are inside the tunnel, and also appears to be provided by the National Security Agency. Of course, just making this glowing logo was a lot of fun. So I don't know. I think that, I've now been working with these new printers that are able to do some interesting things with materials for about 2.5 weeks. And my notes so far are it does create a medium amount of waste if you're using like a bamboo printer that has to extrude new filament, the old filament before loading the new filament. But there are some applications of this that you just can't really do otherwise, especially around like diffusing LEDs, creating really beautiful like light displays, and then creating glow-through objects or glow-in-the-dark objects using more exotic filaments. So I'm going to keep kind of pushing the boundaries of this. Obviously, I've been making glowy QR codes, and we've talked about how QR codes can be malicious. I'm going to show off some more examples of things like that. And by using smaller millimeter nozzle sizes, I think that it might be possible to make QR codes that are high quality enough and durable enough to just kind of slap over existing QR codes and have them really stand up. Now, why wouldn't you just make like a sticker version? Well, often like thermal printing doesn't really hold up very well, and like well-cut vinyl stickers are actually kind of annoying to make. So I think that this actually might have an application in creating like high quality little QR codes that you can stick on things, and that might end up being malicious as well. So if you see a 3D printed QR code stuck over the QR code for your parking or your menu at a fancy restaurant, for one, I might have been there. But if it's not me, then it's probably not someone pranking you, but actually trying to steal your money. So just be very careful with that. So anyway, pushing on with more interesting material stuff. I've had a lot of fun learning with these printers. Personally, I've gone with the Bamboo A1 and the Bamboo P1S. And both of them have printed really well. I've gotten great results out of them. So stand by for more information on that. I made a glowing hatchet with the ICP hatchet man cut out from the blade. I used a second wood. Wow. Okay. That is some James. That is incredible. You must have been the envy of all the ICP people. Juggalos. Sorry, juggalos is the correct terminology. All right. Cool. Well, yeah. So that's a little bit about what I wanted to share about material stuff. I also wanted to talk about some of the crazy devices that I found at Hackaday Supercon. Now, this is going to be a breakout piece of content, and I went through maybe a couple of these things last time, but I want to actually show a little bit about what made this conference so unique. So I have some videos that I pulled out from Supercon. I am going to figure out what the best way to share this is real quick, since I am not trying to show everything on my screen. All right, there we go. Let's try sharing. Everybody's going to get to enjoy the tunnel effect for a second. I'm going to do the entire screen, and then let's switch over here. All right, cool. So at this conference, there were some inventions and other things that I think really stood out and like are worth mentioning. And one of them is the capybara head. So the capybara head was absolutely hands down the most adorable thing there. It was this little capybara where when you booped its head, there was an orange on it. And when you boop its head, it will take a picture of you. So you can see, I think I might have even called this out last time, that this was just like absolutely one of the cutest things. And if you haven't seen this, it was one of the most hacker, the googly eyes too. It was one of the most hacker things I've seen at SuperCon. What I forgot to call out last time was this crazy wristwatch. Let me see if I can get it up here. So this wristwatch was like phosphorescent. It used a, oh, here it is actually. It uses a material that glows and then infrared LEDs that are arranged in a grid in order to create a watch that basically like cycles through its phosphorescent material. So here you can go see as you pull it, it actually prints the current time on the tape. Now, this required a little bit of sophistication. The back of the tape actually needed to be indexed in order for this to work. So I was just so impressed that you could take this kind of concept and then print continuously on any kind of glowing surface like this. It really was cool to see, yeah, some of these patterns come together. Now, all right, I'm gonna make sure, all right, everyone, did that share successfully? Please let me know. I'm a little nervous sharing my entire screen because I can't actually see it, but yeah, so that glowing screen thing was actually made into an even crazier device where he took like a bed sheet and squeegeed like liquid glowing material onto it and then rolled it around on like a mechanical roller and made it so that it was continually printing like full, like really, really, really big images on this giant sheet that was rolling around in a circle. So as like a format for creating like really bright images, especially at night, that are able to, well, not during the day, obviously, but at night, that are able to be seen from a good distance away. Like I've never really seen anything like this. The main drawback to this technology was definitely the fact that you would get like a ghost image of the previous thing that you'd printed on it as it was kind of like cycling around. So again, like the way that this all worked was this guy had printed out and then taped an indexing tape to the back of it that had like little notches on it that it allowed this device to tell when the tape was moving forward and backwards very accurately. So being able to actually index exactly where this was and print things like you would on like a thermal printer is kind of what this idea was. I was pretty enchanted by it. I thought it was really cool. And I could see how like the UV LEDs and the like heater elements of like a thermal printer are very similar in terms of how they create an image. All right, I'm gonna try sharing again. Let's see if there were any other things worth shouting out from SuperCon. All right. So, of course, we had, sorry, of course, we had our friend Davis, who did a talk on this condiment cannon and was just like the envy of the conference. Like this blaster thing was attracting so much attention that every single person at the conference that saw it had to come over and talk to him about it. I will let Davis explain the condiment cannon himself someday, but it's basically something that shoots Smucker's packets at high velocity using these spinning wheels. And it actually has a magazine and a display telling you your current ammunition count. Okay, so this is a soldering iron that is open source, has been in development for years now, and has a lot of really interesting features. So I talked to the creator of this. He is multiple years into this project. The fact he was like wearing it also as a bandolier was pretty cool. But I'm going to be kind of talking more about these. I'm going to be testing them out, buying some, and seeing what all the hubbub is about. But I got to use one of these, and I did enjoy it. I thought it was really cool. So yeah, these soldering irons made by somebody at the conference, like full stack manufacturing. He pulled out the circuit board and showed it to me, and it was horrifying to me how like little and small it is. Basically, there's this whole subfield of development where it's like soldering irons and vapes and other things that are getting these like relatively powerful electronic features. And this guy's kind of at the forefront of developing in this really cramped, small format where the PCB has to fit inside this little tube. And you have very limited options for kind of what you can do inside there. So it was fascinating to see how this project got started. And yeah, it's solder.ninja, I believe, is the domain for this. And it was a really cool project that only could have been seen at Supercon. Ah, yes, Solder Ninja Pen. I was pretty impressed by this. Like I said, like everybody brings their own cool projects to Supercon. And this is one that as soon as I saw it, I knew was something I wanted to talk about later. So I wanted to talk a little bit about SAOs before we fully close that out. Mine is still in development. Don't bother me about it. But some of the ones that we saw there were truly incredible. This Christmas tree one reminding me of the season that's coming up. We had the broken skateboard that I really liked. This TARS one also used a very pretty golden sheen. And I have to say, like, the SAOP is such a cutie. I don't even know if it does anything, and I don't care if it does. In fact, I can see that it doesn't do anything. It is just cute. So this one was actually really interesting because the creator came over and told us about the whole process that they used to create this really beautiful diffusion. It actually has little laser cuts in the acrylic and causes it to diffuse things much better than a normal piece of acrylic would. This one, I don't have any comment other than wow, masterfully executed. This appears to just be like a clear 3D printed dinosaur with an LED stuck into it, which I'm totally fine with. And then this was one of the only full color process PCBs that we saw as an SAO. This is a relatively new process. And this is kind of pretty. I don't totally understand like what the game is here. I feel like this one is like more than meets the eye. There's enough power here and like microcontrollers that I believe that it's possible this is like a game or something where you press the button and like the gems change or something like that. I don't know what this one does, but it was one of the more interesting ones just in terms of material. We have an infinity mirror. Of course, infinity mirrors are really popular. If you can get an LED in there and 2 reflective panes of glass, then you've got an infinity mirror, which looks great. And then this one, we'll have to skip through it, but so creative. We've got a cutie little anime girl with like lights shining through. We have a piece of cardboard. It doesn't matter. Just make your SAO. So the creativity at this conference and the number of people who came together to create hardware was really something. That is just a small fraction of the SAOs that were really like wowing to me. We've got lots more that I'm going to be showing in a breakout segment. So yeah. Oh, I saw the condiment cannon talk. Good. Okay, I'll have to let Davis know. He'll be so happy. So yes, the condiment cannon is Davis's like engineer bait, I think. As if you are a male engineer, probably a female engineer too. It just seems like the male ones are obviously the ones that come straight over. And you see either this condiment cannon or his giant horn gun. You're going to immediately come over and start asking questions and want to hold it and ultimately probably want to shoot it or honk it. Now, unfortunately, Davis's condiment cannon had a honey misfire and splattered honey on the inside, which gummed everything up and required cleaning that actually the entire group at Supercon could not figure out how to do to get it to fire. But that's just the risk when you're firing like sticky substances out of a 3D printed / machine weapon. I will say Davis's horn was a big hit at, I think it was both scale and layer 1. So many people came over and insisted on wanting to honk it that they had to go out back and honk it numerous times, which disrupted America's Got Talent next door. He says there's a slow-mo exploding toast video on his channel from when he shot toast. Yes, I can confirm that Davis has a slow motion video of toast exploding from the condiment cannon that is absolutely worth checking out. You can check out Backhall Studios, and that's Davis's personal channel, and you'll see his condiment cannon exploits. All right, so we've got a lot of news to go over, and I'm going to, let me get this up for all the news we're going to cover today. Oh, and I don't even see the screen. All right, give me 1 second. So I'm driving the show again today. Ah, there it is. I see it. I see it. All right, so we've got a couple of headline pieces that were really interesting, some of which have implications for national security. And also we have some stuff about TikTok that might change the way that we see TikTok being treated in the United States. So let's go over the news of the week. So first up, we have more on that story about telecommunications companies being infiltrated by hackers. So I was talking about how there were some of these wiretapping services that were legal wiretapping services that had been infiltrated by hackers, and these were used to comply with national security requests for information or warrant requests for information. Now the problem is the Chinese hackers here really went for it. They integrated into a number of different systems of US telecommunications providers. And because a lot of these systems are highly niche, like they're very specific to the operator, they might be old, they might be outdated. These have been incredibly difficult to get threat actors out of as they keep just popping up again. So it's not really clear exactly what the hackers were able to steal. They covered their tracks really well. However, it does appear that they had access to the call records pertaining to millions of Americans and possibly access to unencrypted text messaging as well. So again, this is 10 major phone providers, including Verizon, AT&T, Lumens. They were able to get access to a large amount of communication. And because exactly what they gained access to is unknown, we can only kind of look at what they could have had access to or what would have been easy for them. So pinpointing people for precise surveillance after gaining access to these systems would be relatively easy. And as a result, it would be totally possible for the Chinese government then to access information about, I would say, like most Americans, almost every American, based on this type of infiltration. Now, what type of information is really interesting here? Because if you have the ability to process large amounts of data, you can really start to learn about a country by who people talk to on the phone. The ability to look at who people called, how often, and when is a very important thing for building out, social networks or understanding exactly who is communicating with who is associated with who. And that sort of information allows you to maybe conduct more targeted surveillance. From the Chinese hackers' perspective, being able to identify a target, look at people around that target, and easily identify who they're communicating with and all this other information allows you to really get a picture of their life, a snapshot of who is in that person's circle of trust. And as a result, if you have this continued access to all these people's information, you can begin to target them, infiltrate them, and do other things based on that knowledge. So this seems like a treasure trove of information that has been open to Chinese hackers for a good amount of time. And a lot of people who are participating in the investigation are just saying it is going not so well because these telecommunication companies really don't have a good handle on their own network sometimes, or at least like some of the stuff is so niche that it makes it really difficult to go in and figure out exactly where the hackers got in, where they are, and how they keep coming back. So check out more on the story. It is like something special when it comes to how much information hackers could have gained access to here. And the reason being, of course, the Chinese government wants to either target individual people for surveillance, or they want to just have general knowledge on the US population and who is communicating with who. All right, next up, we're talking about info stealers. So this is actually something that I forget that I know a lot because of being on the show for multiple years. But the idea behind an info stealer is that you're able to put something out there in the world and get a guaranteed stream of people infecting themselves, and then just kind of rummage through whatever that info stealer program finds. So what Wired kind of went through was like exactly how do people become infected, like what is going on, and like how do these programs actually make money for their users? Well, there's a pretty well integrated network of people who both write these, distribute them, or earn money off of what they find. And this whole industry employs a lot of different people with various skills who are all relying on people like downloading like free stuff or like torrents or other things that might have been backdoored or infected. Now, we often talk about like Luma Stealer and like some of these other things that are widely distributed, and they are the reason why potentially large companies end up getting breached, because individuals downloading the software, getting infected, and then having important information be stolen from them and then given to someone who knows exactly what to do with it is like a worst case scenario. But as these sorts of free softwares or torrents become more popular for attacking people, you'll find that the amount of info stealer that just gets seeded out into the world is pretty constant. Like as long as you get people downloading the stuff and getting cracked versions of programs and doing other things that allows you to introduce unknown code or get them to like disable certain things to make it run, then you really get a strong base of malware that's always going out there and can kind of just hit people randomly. For example, if someone's sharing your computer or if somebody in your household downloads something, gets infected, and then infects the entire network, then there are ways that these sorts of propagation can both make a lot of money for the people who are writing it and distributing it. And this is multiple levels of cyber criminals. And then also like potentially impact large companies to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. So knowing about info stealers is a big deal. I think this Wired article does a pretty good job of breaking it down. So if you've never heard of this segment of the cybercrime industry, then it's definitely worth checking out and something that I found to be a good read this week. All right, so this one demands particular attention. If you wanted to get information about someone that was only accessible through law enforcement, then it seems like that would be pretty hard. But actually, it seems as though this is an increasingly common tactic for people who are merely trying to like dox someone or get information to scam someone. They're actually going to the lengths of impersonating police officers in order to request information from companies like Google or Apple that are required to comply with this by law and get a number of these requests that are emergency requests. So let me explain what that means. Typically, police in the United States are supposed to submit like a subpoena or like other information to substantiate a request for user information, but there are exceptions. And one of those exceptions is an emergency, where they're allowed to submit an emergency request for information that's like maybe validated through the police officer's department or just through their department email. Now, that means that if someone were to gain access to a department's email, they would be able to send out these requests and get information on basically whoever they want. So like for a normal person, being able to spoof or gain access to an email account and then suddenly get all the information Google has on a user, that's pretty crazy. That could be used for stalking. It could be used for scams. So obviously, this is a powerful way of gathering information. It's just high risk, high reward, right? If you are detected, then obviously impersonating a police officer is going to be a pretty substantial crime here. So the FBI's public notice was basically alerting people, especially tech companies, to the fact that there are a number of fraudulent emergency data access requests. And these are going to US-based companies. As I mentioned, they are apparently prevalent enough that the FBI feels like they need to warn people about this. And like these kinds of bulletins are pretty rare when it comes to this technique, which we've covered in the past on the show. So the fact that it's becoming more popular or at least more successful means a couple of things. One, it must be not that hard to gain access to a department like email address, like a police department email address. Being able to send a realistic looking request or email and then receive it back at that account is the most important part of this whole scam. So it seems like there's a way of doing this, or people are figuring out how to do this. And that obviously comes with other implications, because if you can just hijack a police officer's account in order to conduct like a petty scam, to dox someone that you don't like, then it means that this information could obviously be gathered or used for more malicious purposes, or it's just not that hard to access. So yeah, abusing the public trust of a police officer to request information in an emergency context from like tech companies is not new, but it is alarming that it's becoming more common. Users don't really have any protection against that, right? It all happens completely behind closed doors to the user. So if you suddenly had your information exfiltrated from Google because of one of these emergency law enforcement requests, that would be almost impossible for you to discover. You would just have your information out there and nobody would really know why, unless it was audited or investigated internally. So this is one of the scariest types of breaches to me, where like you have nothing to do with it. Someone just gets mad at you on the internet. They go and they do an emergency law enforcement request, and then they're able to gain all this information about your activity that theoretically should be private. They should have no reason to have access to it. So yeah, I don't know how hard it is to come up on a police officer's compromised email account nowadays, but it seems that it's common enough that the FBI issued a warning bulletin about it. So I would say be on the lookout, but it's really difficult because, again, there are really no warning signs to this. It's just something where the tech company can get tricked into giving information about you that it shouldn't by someone who's really taken a pretty crazy step of compromising a police officer's account. Okay, so this one, I don't understand. Maybe someone in the audience can help me, but let's go through what's happening with the Schneider Electric hack. So hackers have apparently accessed a bunch of data from Schneider Electric. They have not, it seems like, encrypted this. So this new hacker group claims to have stolen 40 gigabytes of data, and they are demanding baguettes, apparently, in order to make sure that they don't release this information. Now, this is an interesting hacking group. It seems as though they are not particularly financially motivated, or they are demanding ridiculous things. And they also have offered I think it's like it was either a 50% discount or, oh yes, let's see. If they would publicly admit to the latest data breach, they would cut the ransom in half. So what it seems like is that this hacker group really doesn't like companies denying data breaches or kind of like making opaque, like just like not very transparent, like public statements about data breaches when they know exactly what happened. So they're kind of taunting companies, saying that basically like you won't have to pay anything if you admit within the first 24 hours that you were breached. After that, you get a 50% discount for acknowledging you were breached. And then after, and then otherwise you can just pay full price. So I don't know why they are demanding baguettes, other than that they are delicious, and perhaps they know from internal documents that Schneider Electric like has some sort of giant stockpile of delicious baguettes that was really the final step of this plan. But it seems as though this new ICA hacker group is something that, yes, doesn't extort cash from companies if they admit to being breached. Oh, sorry, within 48 hours. So that's relatively courteous of them. It would be more courteous to maybe like not leak the data at all. But I think that the criminal goal of establishing transparency from breached companies is something that is, I don't know if that's going to have a real positive impact, honestly. Like, it is definitely the stick side of accountability. Like, so I guess we'll see. But yeah, Schneider Electric still in negotiations over how many baguettes they're gonna pay, or whether they're just not gonna pay any baguettes at all over this data breach. All right, so we have a baby botnet being born. This is where they come from. So it's cute to see. So these are network attached storage devices that are end of life. And that, of course, means they are not receiving any more service updates. They are out there running, doing their thing, but they are no longer being serviced. So if any serious vulnerability is found, then that is just there to stay. And the devices become ticking time bombs for somebody to find them and exploit this and basically take over and use them for some sort of thing. All right, we've got this vulnerability having a cool 9.2 severity score, which is horrific. And this is something where you can send basically an HTTP GET request and take over the device. That's it. That's the whole process. So that's not a lot. And that means that these are going to be pretty swiftly tied into botnets around the world. Obviously, if they are directly connected to the internet, then sending a GET request, I could do that in my browser right now. All you need to do is Shodan scan or something like that to identify where these are operating, and you would be able to target them en masse. So I believe that somebody probably already has. By the time of this reporting, I would not be surprised if all of these were part of some botnet. It is also worth noting that these were previously involved in a breach. So there was previously involved in another vulnerability. There was another vulnerability for the same types of devices. And this was a hard-coded backdoor flaw that were mostly the same D-Link NAS machines as the latest flaw. And there were 92,000 of these back then when this original security vulnerability was discovered in 2024. So these have been hit hard. So basically, like if these haven't been taken over already from the previous exploit that was released on these end-of-life devices, they almost definitely are going to get it now. So even devices that are on a local network will be vulnerable because, again, this is a GET request. Pretty much any malware can detect that maybe this is a vulnerable NAS device on the same network. I can just send a single GET request and boom, I have a method of persistence on this network or escalation that I can do all sorts of stuff with. Or, I mean, I might just be able to ransomware the information on the network attached storage if it's a small, medium-sized business or something like that. So as an attacker, this is a gift. I believe a lot of people who are running malware are going to update their malware to incorporate this vulnerability so that they can exploit any other device on the same network that they've already infiltrated. So you can imagine that if a botnet is able to just beef up its size by identifying, devices on the same network as already infected devices and sending it a single GET request, you're going to see an increase in infected devices very soon. About 60,000, 60,000 of them. So yeah, botnets are getting bigger. All right, so how would you hack a car? We've answered this question, I feel like, so many times in the stream, but we've got a new one. And in this one, this is using Mazda Connect to persistently infect the device. And actually, you have the option to brick the infotainment unit and possibly the car. So I don't know exactly what bricking means in this context. Presumably, it means it becomes inoperable. And if that were to happen while driving, then that could obviously be pretty scary. Method of infection, a USB stick. So I have purchased a lot of these really super small USB sticks that are just like, they're the size of a postage stamp. They're really small. And I've often wondered, like, what could I do if I just have them on my keys? What kinds of programs should I have on there? Well, apparently I could just take over a Mazda, which is interesting. So by plugging in a USB stick, you can modify the database using this chain of CVEs. Let's go over them briefly. So we have an injection in Device Manager. This allows attackers to manipulate the database or execute code by inserting malicious input when connecting to a spoofed Apple device. And that's kind of what kicks this whole thing off. Once you are able to modify the database, then you can use the rest of these, command injection, missing root of trust. This is what causes persistence as well. There's no security checks in the boot process. So as soon as you infect the Mazda, you can actually establish persistence and it will not notice that there's just like extra stuff running that like nobody said should be running. So you don't really need to do any cool like evasion tricks here. You're basically just able to like, install something that boots up with the rest of the car, and the car has no idea that it's not supposed to be there. This parasite program is running along with it, and it doesn't recognize that it has any more or less authority than a official program. That's not good. Then finally, we've got unsigned code in the VIP MCU that allows attackers to upload unauthorized firmware, potentially granting control over vehicle subsystems. So that's where things get interesting. Being able to access vehicle subsystems like braking, locking, all that fun stuff obviously would have an impact on someone's ability to get in or out of the car, to drive it. And the primary infection vector here that people are warning about would be like a valet service or something else that requires physical access. If somebody wanted to sneak back and steal your car later, then infecting it with a USB stick and then just remotely unlocking it or doing other things based on that infection would be a pretty smart move. So another reason to be paranoid of, I don't know, like giving your car to another person or sharing it. Again, is every valet going to be malicious? No, but like I don't know, if they were getting like a $50 kickback per car to like, infect it so someone could steal it or mine cryptocurrency on it later, maybe they just want to mine cryptocurrency on your Mazda. I don't know, but these older infotainment units that don't get updated too often and have like serious problems with the way that they make sure safe code is running, that is really what the problem is here. So if you wondered if there's anything bad you can do from plugging a USB stick into a car, then the answer is yes, provided it's vulnerable, and especially if it is a Mazda, then it means you could persistently infect it and possibly also begin to infect other car subsystems as well. All right, so this was just spooky. If you use let's see, what is it? The Google mobile app. Then if you try to share a link, you may have noticed that it does this weird search.app link kind of thing, where it is kind of like that t.co or whatever the other shorteners are, like bit.ly. It is designed to give better insight for Google on what kinds of stuff people are sharing. But people didn't really get any notice about this. It's a little unusual. It doesn't have anything to do with Google. And also, there is a lot of different domains that are included under the certificate that it uses. So it was a little spooky to see. It doesn't look like malware. It's just outside the normal range of what Google usually does. It's weird and unusual, but it does seem to be safe. I don't really like these sorts of links because I think they're, I don't know, just invasive. Like, you know, like building a lot of data around like what sorts of links people are sharing. Like I'd prefer to just share direct links. I don't need Google like, you know, enhancing the experience in some way. But I think that these are also designed to make sure that malicious links are easily able to be disabled, and just disabling native links entirely and only allowing like, you know, these sorts of like sanitized links might be the way that Google is trying its best to prevent malicious links from being shared, or at least make sure that they are shared as little as possible. That allows them to, you know, basically like remotely disable people's campaigns. Like if they are using this link shortener to then create malicious links and Google identifies that, then they can just get rid of all the link shorteners that point to that particular URL. So I feel like it probably gives them some control over like disabling malware campaigns, but it's still spooky and a little bit annoying. All right, so North Korean hackers have been using a new macOS malware against crypto firms, and this is pretty typical of, you know, a country trying to get around sanctions. Like they want to maximize their value and try to extract information from people who have cryptocurrency value, so they can drain all that cryptocurrency into a big, I don't know, nuclear missile fund. So this is threat actor Blue Nordoff, and the campaign is being called Hidden Risk. So there's a paper by the University of Texas, I think, that is talking about the hidden risk of the recent spike in cryptocurrency price. I believe that's the name of the paper. And the infection chain is they basically pretend to be like an influencer, sending this information to the victim, to urging them to read it and understand the implications of the paper. Now, this is the actual paper. And when you attempt to open this, the PDF, it does this malware dropper, but where's the fake? Okay. It also gives like a fake, oh no, wait, sorry, no, that's a different one that we're doing shortly. No, okay, so it takes the real paper from University of Texas and shows that to the user to kind of distract them while it's executing something in the background. And then it's able to get around some of these new anti-persistence, like like malware features that macOS has built into their security policies and into their operating system. It's really cool. Well, okay, it's evil, obviously, but if you have the Rosetta emulation framework installed, which a lot of devices do, then it gets persistence by modifying this .zchenv zish environment. Oh yeah, zish environment. So yeah, so that means that this file will automatically configure during these sessions. It's hidden really well. It creates this touch file that allows it to get around the normal persistence methods that would trigger macOS to identify, hey, there's something like persistent here. Like, do you want to allow it and actually alert the user? So yeah, like this has been running about 12 months now. It is spread by malicious PDFs and other things that trick the user into thinking they're doing cryptocurrency research, but instead is trying to steal that cryptocurrency from the target. So I think the interesting thing about this campaign is mostly how hard they've tried to work around normal persistence mechanisms that are easily detectable, and instead have been working on some kind of novel things, making only a relatively few amount of assumptions. So Rosetta is a pretty common thing for using like older applications. It's not that unusual to find it on a system. So even though it is a requirement, it does mean that this will not work if the Rosetta add-on is not installed. All right, so this is pretty big. Canada is ordering TikTok to shut down over national security risks. Now, we've had this debate in the United States as well, and we kind of not fully decided, or we haven't really done like anything like binding on this yet, as far as I know. But it looks like in Canada anyway, they are ordering the dissolution of TikTok Technology Canada. That's TikTok's Canadian legal and business unit. So that means that they will not have a legal presence inside the country. This is a little bit of a surprise, I guess, but a lot of countries are starting to focus on TikTok kind of data that it's collecting. And usually one of the arguments is that if they have a domestic business and that business is the one that has access to the data and keeps it within that country, then there's less of a problem. But the Canadian government seems to be doing something kind of almost opposite here. Instead, they're saying that like Canadian citizens can still download, use, and upload videos to TikTok. They just won't have a legal or business presence in Canada. Now, that's a little weird and unusual, but it is a first step towards going after this company and saying that they present an unacceptable national security risk. The United States has been, in particular, kind of behind this push to label TikTok as a like big national security risk, but my argument is also like this is the exact same stuff that Facebook and like Google and other companies do in the United States with zero privacy protections. That same information going to Chinese servers is really the thing that seems to be scaring most people, or at least having the Chinese government potentially have access to that. But given that we just said that the Chinese government has had access to all of your phone calls with everybody that you've talked to for the last who knows how long, like it seems like maybe they already know. So anyway, TikTok is the focus of a lot of different investigations in multiple countries, and the outcomes of those are probably going to determine whether or not they're banned in other places too. Now, again, Canadians are free to use TikTok. It's not banned the way it is in, or they attempted to in Montana. In Montana, they attempted to make it like a crime where you could like go after Google if people like successfully were able to download TikTok in Montana, necessitating some sort of geo-block or technical solution on Google's part to make it so that you can't do that, like removing it from the Play Store in Montana. Now that never actually happened. Everybody still has access to TikTok there. It's not, it's not a real thing, but there were a lot of questions about exactly like what was going to happen here and how this was actually going to be done. All right, going through them. So we also have a little bit more information on this back and forth between hackers and Nokia. So this, I think we reported on last week or the week before. Nokia was saying that there was a data breach that was not impacting it directly, whereas hackers were saying, yes, this is a data breach from Nokia. It seems as though, according to Nokia, this is information that is the source code from a specific installation build from a third-party vendor. And they said it contains like no code that is from them, that was authored by them. Instead, this is like a third-party thing that was installed, and it's not something that they are saying is like valuable information or useful information or damaging to the company at all. So in this case, it seems like they're just trying to say that the hacker is like playing it up as much as they can to try to make money and try to make it seem like this information is more valuable than it really is, where it is just something that is like proprietary for a specific vendor and like doesn't have any code that they've authored. All right, so bringing your own vulnerable driver is a pretty old technique, but this is something I just wanted to touch on because it's something that is very sneaky and it is very successful, and it's often used by nation states and other sophisticated threat actors. So if you have a fully patched computer and it is not vulnerable at all and it is all ready to go, then one of the most, I guess, reliable ways that you can infect it is by bringing your own vulnerable driver. Now, that means you are going to install something that is not malicious in and of itself. It is just a driver for managing a piece of hardware or something like that. But that driver then is vulnerable. So once it's installed, the system becomes vulnerable. And you can easily infect that driver that you just installed and use it as a kind of reliable way of infecting or going after the system. Now, this is great because it means that the defender can't possibly expect what's going to happen, right? Like they are going to have to not only like identify malware, but also look at innocent programs that incidentally become vulnerable. So if you have like a driver and then eventually it becomes known that it has like a 9 out of 10 vulnerability, it's like really, really vulnerable. It's an easy target. Then like as a systems administrator, you would have to block the installation of that driver, even though it might be necessary for somebody to do their work. So let's say it's like an old camera driver or something, and now somebody just can't use that technology anymore. Theoretically, if you're blocking the driver, if it's vulnerable. But this is something that is very, very popular. How exactly does somebody get infected by something like this? Well, as you can see, we've got AutoCAD variants, JetBrains variants. These are torrents. And basically, it's saying that if you want to download a piece of software and then activate it, you need to go and follow these instructions, some of which involve executing malware that is going to end up infecting the computer. So, of course, this is going to probably install Luma Stealer, if I had to guess, but it's going to do something that drops like an info stealer program on here. And we just kind of talked about this in the first story about where these sorts of infections come from. Well, they come from like torrents and other things that are promising free software or to activate free software. And maybe they actually do it, but in addition to doing that, they also backdoor the computer. All right, so we have an active attack against, or rather active recovery from an attack on Washington court systems. If I go to some of these court systems, you can see that they've got notices up indicating that they have limited service and that there has been some impact. So let's see what it says. On November 4th, Washington's Administrative Office of Courts announced that they had identified unauthorized access on the Washington courts network. The office took immediate action to secure critical systems and are currently working to safely restore service. As a result, the state's judicial information system, Washington Court's website, and affiliate websites are currently down. Please be advised that there will be intermittent impacts to the work of the court and in the coming days as they continue to restore these services. So for the impacts are including no ability to look up case information, and we have no access to the system. So if you've got a case in Washington County, you know more about it than they do at this point. We will accept payment at the front counter if you have a copy of your citation or receipt showing amount due. So they are not able to look up the amount of information, the amount of money that you owe them on any of these citations. Essential hearings. If you're scheduled for a proceeding, you should plan to attend unless notified otherwise. Customer service counter. Our customer service counter is open, but with limited services. We encourage customers to check back. Probation. No change. Remain in contact with the probation department. Alternative programs. All right, and the rest of it seems like it is mostly all right. So totally unknown here, like what the attack actually is at this point. It seems like they detected unauthorized access. Typically, this is going to be ransomware, data exfiltration. It's not really clear what phase it was in when they caught it, but they took their entire system down, and they're saying that this was out of an abundance of caution, and they're bringing it back up bit by bit to make sure that they're not making things worse. So that's a pretty cautious and normal approach. I mean, it could be one of two things. One, they caught it too late and the systems are just being recovered painfully from backups, which is actually not the worst case scenario. It's just very annoying. And the second would be, there was unauthorized access. They caught it early and they were just very paranoid and they just shut everything down. And they're going like piece by piece by piece and doing it the right way, spinning things up slowly. Both of those are going to be grueling, painful processes. But either way, hopefully there's not too much impact here, as it seems like there's a lot of different court services that are impacted by this breach, and not just from one county across Bainbridge, Island, Monroe, Puyallup, Milton, and Thurston counties. It's a lot of different of services that go down when a court or other municipal service gets hit. All right, so this is a law that I am encouraged to see. We had a version of this law, or rather like a modification to the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act that carved out some exceptions for security researchers, but this is a corresponding law in Germany that is attempting to make it so that those who are doing security research are protected from legal action. Now, this is necessary because of a story we're going to talk about in a minute, where the city of Columbus, Ohio, sued and is going after legally a security researcher for proving them wrong in a public statement to victims in which they claimed that the data that was released by attackers was unusable. The security researcher proved that that information was actually incredibly sensitive and useful. And now the city of Columbus is going after them with a restraining order and other things to try to punish them for basically catching them in a lie. So these laws are incredibly necessary, but there are some pretty specific limitations to where you are protected. So let's go through them now. So in order to meet the criteria of a security researcher who's not going to be prosecuted, you have to meet the following. One, the action must be carried out with the aim of identifying a vulnerability or another security risk in an IT system. Two, the researcher must intend to report the identified security vulnerability to a responsible entity capable of addressing the issue, such as the system operator, the software manufacturer, or if you don't know who those are, the Federal Office for Information Security. Three, the act of accessing the system must be necessary to identify the vulnerability. So let's say that you start poking around in some company's system, you find a vulnerability, but it was not necessary for you to do all the weird stuff that you did that was like technically illegal. Well, you might still not be in the clear here if a lot of the stuff you did was not actually not actually necessary to identify the vulnerability. So this ensures the exemption only applies to the extent required for security testing without unnecessary or excessive access. So if you conducted an operation where you had just like really extensive access to a company's internal stuff and you were testing around and stuff, and you found a vulnerability, finding that vulnerability would not excuse you from rummaging around in that company's internal stuff and like doing a bunch of unrelated things. That would not be like targeted in scope. It would be considered excessive. So there's still definitely ways that you could get in trouble here. So at the same time, this is kind of like a balance bill where they're saying, okay, we're going to protect some people and we're going to punish other people. Now, the people being punished are those who are going too far. So they're looking to define good hackers and bad hackers in the same law and address some of them with protection and others with increased penalties. So this is saying that in any events where these happen, there will be increased penalties ranging from 3 months to 5 years of imprisonment for offenses resulting in substantial financial damage, acts driven by a profit motive, conducted on a commercial scale or carried out as part of a criminal organization, or cases that compromise critical infrastructure like hospitals, energy suppliers, transportation networks, or affect the security of Germany or one of its states, including attacks originating from abroad. So, all right, what does that mean? It means that they are going to step up the way that they treat people who are doing this wrong. It means that there are increased penalties for not knowing the rules. They're saying, all right, you want protection, that's fine, but we need to make it crystal clear that that protection doesn't apply to every action, and you still need to be able to justify what you've done from a legal perspective. So doing anything that creates financial damage, like incidental damage would be like, you begin probing for a vulnerability on the website and the website crashes and corrupts the database because they designed it incredibly poorly. Is that something where they could go after you? Like they're financially damaged, but like, is that something that you did to them? Like probably not. Like if there's no excessive access and if that financial damage is not something that's like too crazy, and if you kind of tick the boxes of having followed all the rules here, I think you would probably be protected. Now, if you did that for a profit motive on a commercial scale or as part of a criminal organization, the game is kind of up at that point. But yeah, this is something that I think will make it a lot more clear for hackers, security researchers in Germany, what they can and can't do. The penalties here are a little scary, obviously, but it seems pretty easy to not do this, except for number one, which could be an accident. Number two or number three seem like you would either need to be, like a criminal or not very smart at requesting bounties. Now, number two is something that I feel like some people could still get in trouble with. And let me explain why. I think that if you are asking for a reward for your research, you could be found to have done the research for a profit motive. And if you were to, do this on a scale where you are repeatedly reaching out for, we call them beg bounties, where you're like, hi, I found a vulnerability, please pay me. I did all this great work for you. And you're just like, I never paid you. People who do that could potentially run afoul of this. Like if they do something, they, access the device or whatever, and then it's found that it's part of a beg bounty campaign. If you are reporting this, for free or through a bug bounty program, that's one thing. But if you are attempting to either extort someone for money or even just, ask them aggressively to be paid for your beg bounty, you might actually be in violation of the second part. So yeah, really interesting to see because people mess this up all the time. Like failing to turn in a bug bounty correctly is something that has tangled up a lot of people, especially new people. So interesting to see these new regulations being drafted to protect researchers in some cases and then punish them in others if they step over the line. All right, so this is weird. You guys remember those Snowflake data thefts? That was where lack of two-factor authentication caused a number of very large companies to lose huge data stores, which allowed hackers to do all sorts of bad things. This was apparently somebody in Canada. If I was living in Canada, I wouldn't target 165 organizations, but that's just me. So apparently, Alexander Connor Mokta, aka Waifu, was taken into custody on Wednesday at the request of the United States, and this is being corresponded by Bloomberg and 404 Media. The process here was unsurprisingly involving stealers. So we talked about InfoStealer malware 3 times already on the show now, and now we're talking about them again. This was basically lurking out there and a piece of InfoStealer malware that was stealing Snowflake credentials. And after it gained enough of them, the attacker launched this attack where it logged in with stolen Snowflake credentials exfiltrated the database after doing some initial recon and was able to make a lot of money doing exploitation attacks. So again, the core reason why all of this happened was lack of MFA. Because they were able to harvest credentials and get access to these data stores, this guy was able to go after a pretty sizable percentage, 165 organizations out of like the 9,000 or so that were here, but still, some of those companies were very substantial. Those were AT&T, Ticketmaster, Santander, Pure Storage, Advanced Auto Parts, Los Angeles Unified, Quote Wizard / LendingTree, and Neiman Marcus were among companies who were affected by data breaches. All right. We've got another, I'm going to do this briefly, but anytime we see these, this is what you should think. Oh, either like a nation state mercenary software group or sketchy forensics vendor found a zero-day vulnerability with Android devices and was using it to get into devices that were hard to otherwise access. And selling these services is what often causes these alerts to eventually go out, where they're like, all right, there's been limited targeted exploitation, which is kind of what means like the higher tier of hacking. It's going to be, again, nation states, mercenaries, and forensics companies that are using this trick to do stuff that they're not supposed to do. And Google's taking the step of rushing out a patch to make sure that it gets addressed. Now, again, these are usually zero-day vulnerabilities that are used in sophisticated attacks against like journalists or other people that, you know, the rich and powerful have targeted, and will turn to these mercenary services to, you know, gain access to their devices and be able to learn a lot of information about people that they, you know, want to monitor. So always a foreboding sign when we see these updates go out. The specifics here, not particularly interesting, but again, like anytime these go out, it means that somebody was doing something very bad. All right, so we've got an interesting attack here where an unsecured API or an easily abused API was able to send out very realistic looking invoices. These invoices were also persistent. They were being sent out constantly, and it looked like DocuSign was really having a difficult time getting a handle on this attack. So what happens here is apparently they're able to send out a bunch of realistic looking like PayPal and other invoices that have realistic amounts. And if you contribute your signature, they're able to authorize other payments and like do other things that allow them to make money. The fact that a single API is able to send these very realistic invoices that totally bypass like spam protection because they're from like a legitimate verified domain, they have all the bells and whistles of looking like a real invoice, is scary, because it means that if you were to receive these, like they look like they're from the exact company they're supposed to be from. They get right through your spam filter. The amount here looks pretty reasonable. So be on the lookout for this attack. It is an interesting abuse of an API that's allowing a lot of official looking emails to penetrate spam filters and get all the way into the inbox of users and look pretty convincing too. Okay, this is cool. So if you want to infect a Windows computer and you want to do it in a very sneaky way, then you shouldn't need to worry about, you know, Windows Defender and other protections looking into what you're doing at all. Instead, you can install a virtual operating system on Windows that allows you to run all this sneaky stuff inside the Linux box and only interact with the Windows box when you need to. So these infected virtual machines are not completely new, but they are a trend that is very interesting. It means that you can have persistence. You can boot up this little virtual machine whenever you want and use it as a network pivot that gives you access to that person's network. It gives you access to that person's computer and can hide all their malicious actions and software inside of a virtual machine. So this is supplied as the One America survey. It is a 285 megabyte zip archive, which installs the Linux VM with the pre-installed backdoor. When you attempt to open it, this is where you get the fake error. So not only does it trick you, it like tries to get you to do a survey. The survey is like absolutely huge. It takes a minute to download. Then when you try to open it, you get this internal service error. But in fact, it is installing PivotBox. Now, PivotBox is, again, preloaded with the backdoor that securely communicates with the persistent C2 server about once every, I think it was every 60 seconds. So it is a legitimate tool that is digitally signed, and Windows does not raise any issues about this running persistently in the background. So once you're infected, then you've got this evil little Linux box just hiding out on your system, ready to do bad stuff at a moment's notice. At the heart of this tool is called Chisel, a network tunneling program that is pre-configured to create secure communication channels with a specific command and control network via WebSockets. So again, really interesting technique here. The fact that they're just getting people with a survey on this one and like an evil PDF that never loads is kind of funny to me. But an evil little Linux box, how cute! Just hanging out there doing bad stuff on your computer. All right, so the city of Columbus, Ohio, beloved city of Columbus, Ohio, the one that's going after the security researcher, notified 500,000 individuals that a ransomware gang stole their personal and financial information. Now, this comes after they claimed that this information was unusable and that it would not be possible for attackers to actually do anything with this data, which gave a false sense of security to the 500,000 individuals whose data was actually lost by the city in this ransomware breach. So following the data breach, Columbus Mayor Andrew Ginther told local media that the leaked data should not concern the public because it was, quote, encrypted or corrupted. However, security researcher David Leroy Ross, aka Connor Goodwolf, disputed the claim, shared samples of the leaked data, and got hit with legal action from the city. It wanted damages of $25,000 and a restraining order, which has been temporarily allowed. And he is not allowed to download or disseminate any of the city's stolen data. So obviously the city was, let's just politely say, inaccurate here in addressing the concerns of citizens whose data was caught up in this breach. The fact that they were not very transparent about it, and that now only after pursuing legal action from the city against the security researcher are they acknowledging him as being correct. So yes, certainly not a great day for the 500,000 people who are involved with that data breach, but like, you know, at least now they understand the scope of what's happened and the city is starting to be transparent about what actually transpired here. All right, this kind of sucks. ChatGPT 4.0 can be used for autonomous voice-based scam. So this was testing to see whether or not it was actually capable as an agent of carrying out actions that would complete the scam. And it didn't get amazing. It didn't get amazing success. For one, you had to role play. Let me be clear. This was not testing to see if like it was like realistic. It was testing to see if it could even do it at all. So assuming you were the most gullible person in the world and you just had like no idea what was going on, and you gave it all of your information instantly, then this was a test to see if it could even like complete the task. So this was one of the more interesting ones where it tried to get into Bank of America. It like is currently talking to the customer, and the customer is basically walking them through this process. So it's in some way, it's actually just testing to see if you yourself could tell it to go into your Bank of America and do a thing. If the answer is yes, though, then it's pretty scary. So I don't like that you can use some of the traditional AI jailbreaking methods to make it so this AI agent can then log into your account and do malicious things. It seems like if you were just able to combine the voice model with this model, then you could go through and execute bank account transfers or do other things. So again, the success rate is ranging between 20 to 60%. Not super impressive, especially again, considering you have to assume that you're like the most gullible person in the world and, you know, would instantly fall for this. It means that like, yeah, like it probably wouldn't work against like a normal person. So OpenAI was just like, wow, that's great research. And that was pretty much it. They're like, you're making ChatGPT better by doing this. So don't really know exactly what the impact of this is going to be, but obviously being able to turn ChatGPT into an IRS agent and steal gift cards with a 20% success rate is something that people might pour money into. And the average cost of the attack in terms of credits or units or whatever is 17 cents. So if you get a 20% success rate on something that costs 17 cents each to do, and you can scale that attack, it certainly seems like AI might be getting into the scamming business. And then last up, we have LA Housing Authority confirming a data breach. This was one of the largest public housing authorities in the United States, and a cybercrime gang hit its IT network fairly recently. I believe it's Cactus Ransomware Gang, yes. So this agency provides low-cost housing to families, children, and seniors in LA. Really sucks to go after them because it's like, literally like a benefit for all these people trying to get affordable housing. Seems like they have now uploaded an archive containing the stolen files to prove their claims, and they're trying to extort money from basically anyone who will pay them for this, obviously. But going after the housing authority, I don't know if they're going to pay. It certainly is a lot of money, but I don't know that they have. Sorry, it certainly is a lot of data, but I don't know that they have a ton of money to be just paying random ransomware gangs. As a result, it seems like most of the people who are involved then in this data breach are probably instead just going to be getting, yet again, free credit monitoring. All right, and that is just about all we have time for today. Actually, I think we went a little over today. This is going to be my last stream. Oh, it's getting dark. Wow. This is going to be my last stream, I think, in Los Angeles for a bit. I'm going to be heading back to Montana, where I honestly miss my studio, where I can just flip this on and go live with no problems. But yeah, so we'll see everyone next week, where I'm going to be talking about more cloud security stuff. I'm going to be, again, having a little bit more of a relaxed time now that we're done with Supercon, and hopefully able to talk a little bit more about these cool 3D printing materials experiments I've been working on. If you want to support the stream, you can always go to varonis.com/Kody. That's Kody. It lets everyone here know you appreciate the stream. You want me to keep doing it twice a week, every week, and it doesn't cost anything to support us. All right, everyone. I will see you next week. Thank you for hanging out with me today, and I will, see you then. Goodbye, everyone, and have a good and hopefully a very relaxing week.